The President tweeted earlier today that most politicians would have gone into the meeting like the one Don Jr. attended in order to get info on an opponent. He said that's politics. His FBI director nominee said that anyone who was approached by a hostile government for opposition research should contact the FBI rather than taking the meeting. Who's right, and what's the White House's position on whether or not it's okay to meet with a hostile government for opposition research?
Well, look, I'm not going to get into the specifics of this, but I will say that that is quite often for people who are given information during the heat of a campaign to ask what that is. That's what simply he did. The president's made it clear through his tweet, and there was nothing that, as far as we know, that would lead anyone to believe that that there was anything except for a discussion about adoption of the Maginski Act. But I would refer you back to counsel on that one.
Okay, and can I ask about counsel about Mark Kasowitz? He was reportedly he exchanged emails with a private citizen with a number of threats and a profanity-laced set of comments. Does the White House and the President still have confidence in Mr. Kasowitz to speak for the administration on this Russian matter?
Yes, he does. And I know Mr. Kasowitz has issued an apology in that matter. Zeke?
Hey, John. First, following up on Joe's question there, the President's tweet this morning regarding the Russian investigation, did Ty Cobb vet that? Could you talk a little bit about his role? Is his job here to manage the President's personal response to the Russia investigation?
Mr. Cobb, as you know, within the counsel's office there are various attorneys that have different portfolios, and while we have outside counsel, a lot of times the requests that we get from this room require us to go to counsel and say, can we answer this question? What can we say or can't we say? You do your best a lot of times to get us to make a case why this should be answered by the White House, and so we end up spending a lot of time talking to the counsel's office about what can and can't be referred to outside counsel, what still remains in our purview, and so it was the decision of the White House to bring someone on board that, like in a lot of other areas that we have counsels dedicated to that, there was significant interest in the subject to do that.
In the case of the President's tweet this morning, was that something that went through Mr. Cobb?
I don't believe so.
And what is one follow on Made in America? You mentioned this Sikorsky helicopter on this park in the South Lawn that would be known as Marine One. Who paid for that to fly here from, I guess, probably Quantico? And also, is it appropriate to use military resources for a political event?
Well, it would be at bowling, is where I believe that's held. But I think we're very proud. I mean, the idea is to showcase this week things that are made in America, and I know Sikorsky and the state of Connecticut are very proud of the fact that they contribute to our national security, that there are, I assume, hundreds if not thousands of people whose job depends on that, and I think, like most Americans, we're all proud of the helicopter and other military equipment that so many Americans work tirelessly to do, so of course it's appropriate to highlight that. Hunter.
Thank you, Sean. I'm wondering whether you can tell us if Made in America Week will include the Trump Organization or Ivanka Trump brands committing to stop manufacturing wares abroad.
Say that, I'm sorry, if
this, as part of Made in America Week, if the Trump Organization or Ivanka Trump's brands will make any kind of commitment to stop manufacturing gifts, clothes, and other wares abroad.
So there's a couple things that are interesting about that question. First, I think what's really important is the President's agenda, regulatory relief and tax relief, are focused on trying to make sure that all companies can hire here, can expand here, can manufacture here. That's something that he wants for every company, and you've seen him talk about that extensively. With respect to his own companies, obviously it's inappropriate to discuss how anything would affect their own companies, but I can tell you that in some cases there are certain supply chains or scalability that may not be available in this country. I'm not going to comment on specific products, but I will tell you that the overall arching goal, of course, though, is to grow manufacturing, to grow investment here in the United States, and to grow U.S. workers here. So that remains the overall objective.
Obviously, it might be a sacrifice given certain questions about going rates and stuff, but wouldn't it be sort of a way to show leadership?
Again, it's not appropriate for me to stand up here and comment about a business. I believe that's a little out of bounds. But again, I would go back to the President's broader goal, which is to create investment here, to bring back the manufacturing base. And I think when you look at a lot of these indices that measure confidence, both in terms of CEOs, manufacturers, and they're all-time highs. And I think part of that is that there's a lot of confidence that the president's agenda is going to accomplish that. Charlie?
Just a question about the DHS decision to allow 15,000 new temporary worker visas. How does that not conflict with the president's Hire America message?
Again, I'll refer you to DHS on this, but I think one of the things that you're seeing through this is it's not just the number; it's a lot of the qualifications and a lot of that goes through there to ensure that we are hiring and bringing in the people. As you know, the president has been supportive of the RAISE Act by Senators Cotton and Perdue, which seeks to really look at it more of a merit-based immigration system, and that's something that he continues to push for, and will continue to work with Senators Cotton and Perdue and others to help get that in a place that will focus more on merit-based and really provide the overall reform that he's been talking about for a long time. Abby?
Since Friday, the president has tweeted 4 times about healthcare, but he's also tweeted 6 times about the U.S. Women's Open, which was held at a private property that is owned by his company. So the question is it appropriate for him to essentially advertise his private business using his Twitter feed and his time when comparatively less time is being spent on healthcare, an issue that, as you know, is the most important issue to Americans right now?
Well, I respectfully disagree with that. I mean, in the sense that you sending off a tweet takes, what, 5-10 seconds. As I just mentioned to Kristen, he's been extremely engaged throughout the weekend, making phone calls, talking to folks, meeting with his team, getting updates. So to compare a tweet with a meeting or a phone call of substance is probably a little...
But he did spend a lot of his weekend at the U.S. Women's Open and seemed to be very engaged in it. I mean, the tweets are perhaps a second long, but it seems to indicate what the president is spending his time on. So how do you assure the country that he actually is, in fact, engaged on health care?
Well, I mean, look at...
when we know where he was
right.
over the weekend, he's been tweeting about it.
Because I would suggest to you, one, I just told you that he's been extremely engaged in talking to different senators. I know that some of them have mentioned that they had extensive discussions with them. Number two, this is the same group, we got a lot of that it'll never get through the House. He continued to work hard, he continued to be engaged then, and it came out. We continue to do what we have to do, and we'll make it work. But we're going to get this done. We'll go move on. We'll do tax reform. We're going to do infrastructure. The president's got a very robust agenda, and I think when you look at the amount of activity that he's been able to do and the results that he's getting, I think that speaks for itself. Andrew?
Can I ask another American question, Sean?
Yeah,
just
sure.
a quick one. Ivanka Trump's, the head of Ivanka Trump's business said that it is currently not possible to make her products here in the United States. So what is the White House's or this administration's policy remedy for companies like that who say there's just no way to do it? How do they make their products here in America?
I mean, I can't answer that question in the sense that I'm not, but I can tell you that it depends on the product, right? I mean, there are certain things certain industries that we don't do as much anymore, and there's certain things that we do more. I mean, there's a certain thing that, certain aspects of technology and labor, but as I mentioned before, in terms of scalability, there's certain things that we may not have the capacity to do here in terms of having a plant or a factory that can do it. The beautiful thing about a capitalistic society is that if there's enough of a demand for it, it will happen. And I think that's what the president's trying to do, is if you lower the tax rate, if you lower the regulatory burden, you will hopefully grow businesses and grow manufacturing. I've talked to several CEOs and business leaders in the past couple of weeks about tax reform, and it's amazing how many of them tell you that they pay the 35% rate, and you say to them, what will you do if that rate drops? And the number one thing they talk about is they're going to invest and build more in their company. And I think that's what we need to do. But some lines, some industries, some products may not have the scalability or the demand here in this country. But like so many other things, that if that demand if there's enough of a demand, then hopefully someone builds a factory and does it. But we've seen that, in your own industry, where you saw the decline of newspapers, for example, and you've seen a lot more online content and online publications. That's, the evolution sometimes of some industries. But I'm sure somewhere around the world, the newspapers still get delivered every day, in a much greater way than they do here.
Is it appropriate if there's no, in the case of Ivanka Trump's businesses, handbags, shirts, purses, whatever, if there's no capacity, is it appropriate to make those things overseas?
Well, think about all of the things that we buy every day. Of course, there's a market because we depend in this country for so many goods and services, some of which are made in America, some of which aren't. Obviously, we want to create an environment in which more things are made here, more things are exported from here, and that's what the president's agenda sets out to do.
Thanks, John. The Ukraine government reportedly went into damage control mode in an effort to make amends when President Trump won the election after working with DNC administration officials to undermine its candidacy. Was this an issue that was discussed during President Poroshenko's visit to the White House in June? And has the president discussed it with him?
You know, I actually, that's an interesting question. I will have to get back to you. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot more interest in recent days with respect to what the DNC did in coordination with the Ukrainian government to try to collude and achieve a goal of having someone removed, which ultimately did happen. So I don't know whether that came up with the president. I'd be glad to look into the call. I know that that story and the DNC's collusion with the Ukrainian government has definitely gotten a lot more attention since that meeting. So I'm not sure that it was necessarily topical at the time. But now that there's been renewed interest in what the DNC did, I'm glad to look further.
Does what the DNC did have any impact on this administration's policies towards Ukraine?
I don't. It wasn't something that was discussed at the time of the visit that I'm aware of. I'd be glad to follow up and find out whether that did come up. But again, my only point is that at the time of the visit, I don't believe it was as topical as it is now. George.
At a briefing last month, you said you didn't believe the president factored in, when he made a trip, what his popularity is in that country. Now we have a report of a transcript of a conversation between Prime Minister May and the president in which he asked her to quote-unquote fix his popularity so he gets a better reception. Do you have any reason to doubt the accuracy of that transcript, that conversation took place, and do you still believe that he doesn't factor in his popularity?
I believe that I'm not going to comment on rumored leaked conversations. I will say that he was pleased to accept Her Majesty's invitation and looks forward to visiting the United Kingdom. Ken.
North Korea, South Korea has offered to hold talks.
Right.
What's the president's view of that? And are there certain conditions that the president would like to see met before those talks take place?
Yeah. Well, obviously, those comments came out of the Republic of Korea, and I would refer you back to them. That being said, I think the president's been clear in the past with respect that any type of conditions that would have to be met are clearly far away from where we are now. Jeff.
Sean, has the White House been monitoring the demonstrations in Venezuela? Do you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, we obviously are concerned about that. We've been watching what's been going on. We congratulate the Venezuelan people for the huge turnout in the referendum yesterday and the unmistakable statement that they made, that they delivered to their government. We condemn the violence inflicted by government thugs against innocent voters and efforts by the government to erode democracy in Venezuela. We once again call for the Constituent Assembly of July 30th to be canceled and for free and fair elections to be scheduled.
Just one follow-up on Iran. A senior commander in Iran's Revolutionary Guard said today that if the United States designated the group a terrorist organization and applied new sanctions, that it would be perilous for U.S. forces in the region. Do you have a reaction to that?
I don't think our forces will ever be, what was the word?
Peril?
No. I think our forces are the greatest fighting machine in the world, and we will do everything we can to protect our country and to make sure that we extinguish any threats that we face. Thank you, guys. Hope to